Hello, and welcome back to Beyond Teaching, Season 2, the pandemic miniseries for Thanksgiving week. Food for thought. Is there such a thing as a run-on title? We're pleased to be returning to you on the Psych Sessions Network. This series is hosted by Susan Nolan from Seton Hall University, Adiyinka Akinseler-Smith from City College, New York, City University, New York, Asani Sewell from Pacific University, and yours truly, Eric Landrum from Boise State University. That's right, this is a 5-part miniseries all released during Thanksgiving week in the U.S. 2021. All of these episodes are pandemically themed. You know, the gift that keeps on giving, and were recorded from May 24th through October 4th, 2021. What are you in for? Oh, the places we'll go. Each day, Monday through Friday of the break, we'll release a new episode. You'll hear us discuss issues such as stopping the tenure clock, publication lags and research productivity, the challenges of campus mask mandates, vaccines and vaccine mandates, the joy and anxiety of returning to face-to-face instruction, online conferences and plausible solutions, DoorDash appears, the curmudgeon. You can guess who that was. Travel budget privilege, student pandemic sluggishness, frog swallowing, what? Weekend fun and hobbies. Beyond Teaching will launch Season 3 on Wednesday, December 1st, and we'll make one episode available for 10 consecutive Wednesdays in the same manner as we did for Season 1. In the meantime, please enjoy this Season 2 pandemically themed miniseries, suitable for binge listening over your break or whenever you want. So, welcome back to another episode of Beyond Teaching. We're delighted to be with you today. I am Eric Landrum, and I'm with my colleagues,
Asani Sewell and Yinka Akinseler-Smith.
And we're missing Susan today, but we are going to carry on without our fearless leader. I think we've stumbled onto a topic, and we've been chatting about post-pandemic faculty productivity or expectations. Is that where we're headed?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, and just what the work life's going to look like post-pandemic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the workload and the expectations. And, at my institution, folks were able to apply for a tenure clock stoppage or extension. Some people have taken a leave of absence. I've heard of some institutions where faculty members were able to take some of their medical leave that had accumulated and take time off or a reduction in teaching. And I guess the conversation is about, what's the new world going to look like post-pandemic? Will people who took a tenure clock extension not be harmed? Will it be okay? Will research expectations change? Will teaching expectations change? Will faculty members who want to teach more online be able to? If they want to teach from home, do they have to return to their offices? I guess that's kind of our general topic for today.
Yeah. And I think it's really going to vary probably from institution to institution in terms of the policies, but just that, and to kind of add to the mix, I think now that since everyone's been home doing the Zoom thing, we've seen an intrusion in terms of home life, like the workload spilling over. The assumption is you're home, so you're working. And there has been limited differentiation. So people have been working around the clock. But then again, for some managing. And we've seen the literature where women, especially women who have children, have struggled because your kids are at home, you're trying to attend to their needs, and then you're also trying to attend to your students' needs, do faculty stuff, and write and do research, which is pulling people in more ways than one. Yeah.
I think that another narrative here are for folks, academics like me, who do not have families, do not have children, working from home. And I think that for me, I think maybe for others like me, I realized the way that I was working before was simply not sustainable. When I think about the massive commute that I had to get to my campus, for example, how did I pull that off for all those years now? I'm looking at it and saying, how am I going to do that again? Can I try something different? Can I maybe try to flex some days at home? I think that the being at home has allowed me to re-examine the ways in which I approach my work and what's going to be sustainable for the next 10, 15, 20 years moving forward, you know? And so I think that there have been some real positives that have come out of this that I'm hoping to hang on to as our campus opens up and we're back on campus starting in the fall.
So, Asani, do you feel like that commute to and from home on those days was that, you know, I hear, and maybe I might be getting this wrong, that in reflecting about that, that feels like a waste of time, perhaps. But were you kind of powering up for the day in your brain, and on the way home, were you rocking out, or pardon me, in Portland, were you grunging out on the way home? Or was it that drive home was so frustrating in traffic that you were ruminating about, and I may be overinterpreting, but now after the pandemic experience, you're going, I just reclaimed 2 hours of my day, and that was delightful with minimal distraction. I'm liking this. I want to keep teaching and doing research and providing service from home.
Yeah. Yes, I think, Eric, now fortunately, most times I would say probably 95% of the time I could get on the train and take the train into our campus. So it was about an hour on the train, but I could do my work on the train, and there are many other people that would be around that be working too. So it wasn't necessarily lost time per se in terms of productivity. But when it comes to just sort of thinking about maybe that's a time of day when I would prefer to do some self-care. Well, that's a little bit harder to do on the train when you're doing your commute, for example, right? So that those are the kinds of things that I'm sort of thinking about. Or if you just want to be really flexible, there's just sort of more flexibility I feel like I've gathered as a result of being online. I don't know if that feels the same for you all, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me at this stage, it has worked, but I'm also thinking of colleagues who, again, who are parents who have not been able to, or who have struggled. They're coming up for tenure. There is an expectation in terms of what you've published. And, people are counting what those publications are or how many there are of them, where you publish, were they peer reviewed, how high was the impact factor. And this has been a lost year for many people. And so even for those who have pushed it, well, okay, now is the time, let's get it on. And, so what happens when the letters and the documents are sent out? Are those people who are reviewing your package cognizant, sympathetic, empathetic towards that? Or do they need to be reminded? Or do they just not care? We have our standards, and that's it.
hmm It's a good point. I don't know to what degree academic institutions are going to be accommodating as time rolls on about this particular period. I certainly am getting a sense from institutions that I know of that there's starting to be a little bit of a return to, or thought that we're going to be returning to business as usual. Like we're going to get back to how things were pre-pandemic without recognizing that pivot's really difficult and people need time to make that transition, a long time to make the transition. I don't feel a lot of confidence and certainty that academic institutions in general are going to be accommodating in that way. Yeah.
I'm smiling because I think about that pivot, Asani, and I think about what is it, a 20-ton tanker, I'm going to get this wrong, but a 20-ton tanker at sea takes, what is it, a mile to make a right turn? There is no instant right turn on a dime. Institutions are like that. We don't, we use the term pivot, but we didn't really pivot. Individual faculty members pivot, institutions didn't. And, we might give a 1-year reprieve on the tenure clock, but I think if we're fair about it, it's a lag, right? And so people in 2021, where we're at right now, people submitted things for publication in 2019 and 2020 that might be getting published right now in 2021. The pandemic happening in 2020 and 2021, we won't see the effects of that, maybe not until 2022 or 2023, when the pipeline isn't being satisfied. I think a different solution It could be, it's probably a yes and an extension of the tenure clock, but also changing the standards for promotion and tenure and making exceptions where necessary. Now, some of your R1 schools may shudder at the thought of this, but this is what we did in our department. So let's say that the standard before applying for promotion and tenure, promotion to associate professor, was 5 peer review public excuse me, 5 peer review publications in scholarly index journals. Let's say that's the standard 5. We made a rule that said we're going to make an exception that during this period, the new standard is now 3. And if you make the exception in that way, hopefully those external reviewers will not confuse that one bit.
So with something like that, when you send the package out, is that included in the letter to the external reviewers?
Yes, ma'am, it is. And so now there are challenges to that because we have to convince our own college curriculum committee, hey, look, this is still rigorous. These are peer reviewed scholarly index journal articles. We made an exception to the pandemic. We looked at scholars across our college. We looked at our peer institutions and what they're looking at, and it was a pandemic.
Mhm.
And we're trying to accommodate our colleagues who, in general, we want to set up a system for success, not a system for failure. And so it's how we couch it. We're not screening out, we're screening in.
Mhm. Yeah, that sounds to me much more civilized.
Yeah.
And granted that we have the luxury of being civilized and we have the luxury of we're not a Harvard, we're not a Stanford, we're not a Princeton, we're not a University of Nebraska. We're not an R1. We aspire to be an R1. We're not going to be an R1 in my lifetime. I might have to edit that part out. But let's take care of our own people.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a real opportunity here for institutions and individuals to sort of re-examine and for us individually and collectively ask ourselves, the way that I was doing things before, was that working for me as an individual, but institutions also to ask that too, you know? And I don't know to what degree that conversation is going to happen at the academic institutions. You know, as I've said before, I think that things will at some point get to sort of business as usual, but I don't think that was really working for lots of people. When you think about our BIPOC faculty and rates of tenure and promotion for that group, or our queer LGBTQ plus faculty, women, you know, all these different categories of folks that are from marginalized backgrounds, that the way things were before weren't actually working. And so in a way, perhaps some of the standards that are putting into place, perhaps to accommodate the realities of COVID, maybe are the kinds of standards that should be around to allow everyone to be successful and to have more of an equal chance.
You know, Sonia, I'm listening to you say this and I'm thinking just how this past year, on so many levels, you know, COVID, Black Lives Matter, all of these issues, you know, it's really been, I think, I would hope, a time for us across so many levels to hit the pause button and reflect and say, how is this working? What is working? What isn't working? And can we begin to shift things that we should have been shifting all along? But we've gotten to this point where it's like certain things are no longer sustainable.
Right.
Yeah, I think we have to be more creative, I think, in higher education. We can value scholarship and scholarly contributions without it having to be reduced. And forgive me for using this phrase, the bean counting of scholarships. I mean, that seems to be like the lowest common denominator of counting. And when we count things like technical reports, like the report that comes out of a grant, but maybe the grant outcomes haven't been published yet, that could be more influential. I have a colleague, Karen Knauffel. She's at Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, Georgia. And she told me about a project she was involved with in her community using psychological science to get people to wear masks during COVID. And she worked with community members, with the Chamber of Commerce. And I'm not going to get all the details exactly right, but she worked at the beginning, March, April, May 2020. I don't think it was called Mask Up. I can't remember the name, but it strikes me that kind of community involvement, whether it was that or other places where faculty members I know worked with student bodies for Black Lives Matter and organizing and helping students get coordinated and figuring out what to do and changing attitudes and beliefs, those faculty members, that strikes me as using their scholarly knowledge to advance public good. Couldn't we substitute those things for a publication in the count towards promotion and tenure?
Yeah. It
Fancy
seems
that.
like we really should, right? I mean, all of our institutions, and we all represent 3 different institutions, have these diversity statements that we sort of march out and say is really kind of guiding everything that we do at our individual institutions. And if that were really totally true, Eric, the kind of work that you are talking about would be counted, would be seen as being deeply valued, but there is a bit of a mismatch there for
Mm.
sure. Yeah. I'm thinking about this and I am thinking about the ways in which in academia there is a strong leaning towards presenteeism. And by presenteeism, I mean it's that sort of bean counting like, are you in your office? Are you
Mhm.
kind of around in the department? Can people see you and find you? And all this sort of thing that was just, has been a big part of my academic life from graduate school all the way up that we then obviously had to walk away from as COVID was happening and we had to get into social distancing. So I'm really hoping that as things begin to go back to sort of a new normal, right? Because not back to normal, but back to a new normal, that we will be really critical about the presenteeism piece, that you have to be in your office in order to be doing valuable, meaningful work. The faculty member that you just described, your colleague, Eric, that you described, sounds like someone who a lot of her work wouldn't necessarily be in her office. She's in the community
Right.
doing these things, and that is so valuable. So I'm kind of hoping that we can, sort of examine that piece. Yeah. Doesn't have to all happen like in your office on your campus in order for it to be valuable. And to create more flexibility for people that need to work from home, they're caring for a sick loved one, they've got kids, this or that. Just more flexibility, more humanity, as we're moving forward.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Just simple things. So, as department chair, one of the things that we are doing in my department this coming fall is that we have a conference room, and I may have mentioned this in a previous episode. We're going to have video capability such that there is one camera with microphones suspended from the ceiling so the people in the conference room can all be on one portion of a Zoom. But our Thursday faculty meetings, which are traditionally Thursday at noon, um, we've made the decision that if you want to be at home or elsewhere in your office or together with us, you can be together in one room with us, or you can be on your own individual Zoom connection, and we'll have the technology to support that. And so we still want you to be at a faculty meeting. Faculty are still expected to attend those meetings and vote when it's necessary, but we're not going to dictate. And I love your word, Asani, presenteeism. You need to be present with us on screen, but not necessarily in room. And it's going to cost us a little bit of money, but we're investing in our faculty to give them more flexibility. And I think that's a good use of our funding.
And it means for a happier faculty.
And that's a good thing during a pandemic because again, I think each of you have alluded to self-care. And we need to concentrate on that now more than ever. I think academics are leaving higher ed at an alarming rate. Sometimes it's always been a little bit of lack of salary support, but it's more than that. It's the stressors, it's the lack of moral support. And now in a pandemic, it's harder more than ever sometimes to get excited about what we do.
Yeah. I will be very curious also to see to what degree the resources return to faculty. Certainly there has been an economic piece to the COVID, and so many of our institutions have had to respond by tightening the purse strings a bit. And so what that has meant for me as a faculty member has been the loss of travel funds. Well, that's kind of fine. We're not really going anywhere at this particular moment. But then some of the faculty development funds have also been reduced or eliminated to a certain degree. And so I'm very interested and eager to see when those funds return and if they will be at the same level as they were pre-pandemic. I don't know about for you all, but for me, being in academia as a professor these last 15 years or so, I've seen in general a little bit of a reduction in funding and support for faculty, like you're asked to do the same amount or more with less, has been the trend that I've observed across two different institutions that I've been a professor at. So yeah,
Yeah,
very curious to see that part.
I I agree with you, and not to get whiny and complaining about it, but, with the ways in which we've had to adjust to online teaching, the equipment, the phones, the Wi-Fi, the ring lights, the microphones, the da 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 da. Eh, and I didn't get any money from those
It adds up,
purchases.
doesn't
I
it?
mean, it does add up, and I mean, my blessing is that I had money from grants. I had some whatever special funds that I could draw down on, but not everyone had access to that. People were doing it out of pocket, and it does add up.
Mhm.
Yeah, different departments have different funding streams, and some departments are fortunate that they can be entrepreneurial, and other places are really strapped. And there is not a one size fits all solution here. We're really fortunate at Boise State that summer school income is a revenue stream for us that can be very lucrative. And so I'm going to use the word blessed. We were blessed to be able to have summer school income from the past few summers and to be supportive of our faculty. So even during the pandemic, we kept asking faculty over and over, what do you need at home? Do you need an ergonomic chair? You're spending a lot of time in that chair at home. Are you sitting in a dining room chair that's killing your back?
That would have
We'll
been me.
well, and what we did is that we worked through our vendors at Boise State, which we are required to use,
Amazing.
and we gave them access to a catalog where they could custom design their chair with lumbar support and colors. And then that chair got direct shipped to their home. And sometimes those chairs cost as much as $800. For other
That's
faculty
great.
members, they wanted a standing desk. And so they went again to the approved vendor list. And a couple of faculty members got one of those standing desks with the motorized thing that'll move it up and down. And we direct shipped it to their home because it's an investment.
Amazing.
Honestly, it's an investment in their health.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It totally is, Eric. It makes so much sense. And
And yeah, we were able to do that because, again, we're fortunate. We're blessed to have that summer school revenue that our dean allows to pass through 100%. She could take a cut off the top. Other deans do. She doesn't. And so we invest that. We save some for a rainy day, but we reinvest that into our faculty because what else would we do with it? And when we have a chance to spend it on travel, we will. We'll spend it on travel and conferences. And we did that as much as possible for our adjunct faculty as well as our full-time faculty because they're teaching from home and they're sitting in that same
Mhm.
comfortable dining room chair.
Mhm.
And they're teaching sometimes as much or occasionally more than our full-time faculty. So why not support them? Make sure they have a laptop. It's hard to pay for Wi-Fi connections. It's really hard to pay for month-to-month things through our system, but one-time purchases we can do.
It's amazing.
It's great. I'm so glad to hear that story, Eric. It brightens my heart a bit because I've been hearing the more the scarcity. I've been hearing the scarcity stories. So that's so wonderful. What a wonderful model. And so my question is Boise State.
The
I probably
answer
wanna
is we actually are. There's a lecture position open now, and 2 assistant professors will come open here relatively soon. One from a departure, one from a retirement. But Asani, here's the absolute truth. We would love to have you, but we won't be able to afford you.
Yeah, right. It's true.
One thing I just want to say, going back to what you were saying, not that you're not wonderful, Asani, and they shouldn't want you.
We definitely want you. We
But
just
my
won't.
hope is, having heard what you've had to say, Eric, about the way your institution has handled this, I am hoping that other institutions that are listening to this are taking notes
Yeah.
and recognizing how important it is to care for your faculty in big, small, and medium ways.
Yes. And I'm just thinking about how wonderful that was for the physical bodies, right? That you're not dealing with the aches and
adjunct.
pains of not having a setup that works for your body, but just how amazing that must have been for morale. That I matter, this institution cares about me, they want the best for me. It must have done wonderful things for morale as well.
I hope so. I mean, we haven't been together all together yet, in over a year and a half. But yeah, and some adjuncts didn't ask for anything. Some wanted a better webcam compared to what they were using on their laptop. Others, we shipped a chair. One, we shipped a desk. There's no reason not to take care of them when we have the money. It's one-time money. It's not like we can convert it into budgeting is really weird. Maybe it's weird everywhere, but it's not like we could take all this one-time money from summer revenue and put it into a salary. So it's not that recurring type of budget where we could have hired someone or we couldn't put it into faculty raises. It's not that type of budget money, so to speak. It's more for one-time purchases like the things that we did. All right. Well, any last thoughts about post-pandemic
I would love to hear from the two of you just I guess in summary, what do you think was going to be different, or how are you going to approach the work differently, or, you know, because right, it falls on individuals and institutions, I think, to some degree, to make some decisions around post COVID life, as it relates to the work that we do. So is there anything that you think will stay or go in your professional lives, or different ways you'll think about things, or you'll do this a little bit differently? Or I'd love to hear
I mean,
thoughts
off the
about
top of
that.
my head, I'm just thinking more flexibility, as opposed to the rigid, this is the way you do things. You go in, you come out. There's just more flexibility in terms of how we approach teaching, how we approach research, and how we engage students, frankly.
Absolutely.
Sonny, that's such a good question. You alluded to the mantra that higher ed and other, corporations and businesses and sectors have said for so long, do more with less. And higher ed has not been immune to that. But I think for me, maybe what I will try to concentrate post pandemic is do less, but better. Maybe I don't have to do all those things I was doing prior to the pandemic, but I sure would like to do the things I do and do them better, and maybe doing less and saying no more often. Another episode that we've talked about in season 1 would be a better choice for me.
I think for me, the daily self-care, which I've, gotten into a good habit with since we've been working from home. So, as opposed to sort of waiting until the weekend or waiting until a break from school, to lean into the self-care, to try to make that a regular daily habit. And I'm a health psychologist, so you think I would know better. But anyway,
Hey,
let's just try to.
guilty.
Yeah, that's gonna be important. And I like what you were saying, Eric, about doing less but better. Absolutely. I love that. I think I wanna do that as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again, all of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was fun.